Thank you for joining this episode of Real Talk, Real Trust with dotCMS. I'm Ryan Bikini, your host. I'm joined by two very special guests today, Inna, our head of marketing, and Zain, our CEO, who's been with us multiple times. So great to have you both. The topic for today is building a winning marketing plan for fiscal year 25. We thought having you, Inna, here would be a great fit to talk about our view at dotCMS. And we thought that there was a great place for dotCMS to enter the conversation about planning for next year, because content, we believe, is at the center of what all marketers do, how we think about building trust. It is in many ways the lifeblood of how customer experiences are created today. So I'm thrilled to have you both with us, and we're going to dig right in, just talking about how you build trust in the age of AI. So I always like to start out with some quick introductions. So Inna, maybe just a minute or two about yourself, your background, your role at dotCMS, and Zain, I think most of our listeners are familiar with you to date, but a quick intro on your side as well. So Inna.
Hi, everyone. Our Real Talk, Real Trust listeners. I'm super excited to be the guest here on this podcast today. My name is Inna Bosenko. I'm VP of Marketing here at dotCMS for about 6 months now, and currently in the stage of finalizing our plan for our marketing strategy for 2025. So this is the perfect time to chat about this, and especially in this current marketing landscape that is so challenging and so AI forward, AI dominated. So hoping that this episode can serve as some tips for your strategy as well. A little background on me. I've worked in marketing for about 13 years now, predominantly in B2B tech space. And I would say something unique about me is that I've worked hands-on in pretty much every angle of the marketing function, from content creation to optimizing, scaling operations. So I would say I have a pretty unique perspective and a holistic view of the marketing strategy. So hoping this episode can be super helpful for all of you.
Inna, awesome to have you. Thanks for the background. Zain, over to you.
Hi. This is Zain Ishaq, CEO of dotCMS. We're a content management system, so we live and breathe marketing more than we should probably. So super excited about this episode, diving in on how to plan for 2025, based on all the changes that we are seeing in not only technology from an AI perspective, but also what do our audiences are actually now expecting from brands and companies, given that there is such a proliferation of content everywhere. So looking forward to it.
Awesome. Thanks, Zain, for joining, and excited for your perspective. We start the episode after introductions like we do with each episode, which is a quick rapid fire. I will remind you both of the rules because, Zain, you have been a repeat offender, which is you can only answer with one word. You cannot give an explanation. It's one or the other. They're designed this way. So Zain, I'm going to start with you. Quarterly or annual plan?
I'd say annual. I wish I could explain.
Zain, Inna, collaboration with your CRO or CFO for your plan?
CRO first, CFO later.
We didn't hear from Inna on annual versus quarterly. I am very curious.
All right. Well, we'll go back to it in a sec. New tactics or improve existing ones? I'm going to go to you, Inna, for this one.
Analyzing existing stuff and then pivoting and then starting new stuff.
That was definitely not a one-word answer, but a good one. Zain, last one to you. AI for internal process or for consumer engagement?
Internal.
All right. Well, I'm going to give Inna, if there was a winner and a second place, I would give you the winner for the elaborate answers and context, but Zain for the winner for following the rules. So I guess you're both winners, but still that opening has yet to hold to anyone ever following the full set of rules. So let's move on. Inna, would love to get your sense as a starting point of how the role of marketing has changed in the last 2 years, and if you think there's been significant changes to the role of marketing.
how has the role of marketing changed in the last 2 years is how has it not changed in the last couple of years? It's a completely different space now that we're dealing with. For starters, it's very saturated from every possible angle. And so the two challenges that I would outline for us marketers right now is first, we have to stand out from the crowd, but we have to do it in an authentic way. So we have to build that relationship with the customer and stand out among all the competitions and all the other brands who are trying to compete. And the second is delivering value. So everything we do, and this is how we're approaching the marketing plan for next year, everything we do has to be valuable. It has to be a resource, a tool, or some sort of value value driver for our customers and for our prospects. So that's at the heart of how we're approaching our plan. We have to find this balance between quantity and quality, where quantity has to be there when it comes to discoverability with AI and things like ChatGPT being the place where marketers or any of our buyers are doing research these days. So we have to have these assets that will have us be discoverable on platforms like that. And at the same time, we have to provide quality in the form of long form assets, videos or guides, events, or anything that we do where the customer is going to walk away having learned something or having taken something. Even if they're not necessarily ready to buy, they will have that resource, that toolbox at their disposal now from your brand, from your company. So we have to find that balance, which is very tricky with all the AI tools and all the tools that we have in our arsenal now. And all the marketers listening right now, we've seen all the posts and articles right now that are like, we need 300,000 touches now to get our prospect to go into consideration stage. And it's true. It's exactly what is happening because the buyers are a lot more savvy. They do a lot more research. But every single one of those touches, the detail there is that they have to be authentic. They have to be building that trust and relationship with your customer. It cannot just be spray and pray and like fluffy tactics and just, your typical static ads or, cranking out content. It has to be authentic and you have to provide value. So in that sense, the space has changed so much, and we have to find that balance, and that's where we're at. That's what marketing leaders are currently dealing with.
Yeah, the authenticity piece is a really tricky one in the age of AI because authenticity and discoverability are two things that are difficult to match because there's a level of care and specificity that makes something authentic. But if you don't have enough of those assets, then you're not going to show up in the consideration set. So I think it is one of the hardest times, at least in my career, to be a marketer. Sat in a seat similar to yours, Inna, and just understanding that there's so many dynamics at play that you have to take into consideration. But Zane, how about to you? You have a macro view of how marketing has changed. You talk to a lot of marketers within our client base. How do you think marketing has changed in the role of a marketer in the last 2 years?
Yeah, thanks, Ryan. From my perspective, I think one of the biggest changes that has happened over the past 2 years is marketing has probably now taken really a central position within an organization. Again, I haven't been involved in marketing for a decade, so I'm not obviously speaking from my experience before and after. But I think marketing used to be more about awareness and, let's say, advertising in the true or the, I guess, a more traditional sense of marketing. And today, marketing is at least expected to drive all customer value, right? It has to be super collaborative across the organization, from customer experience, really understanding the entire customer journey, and then from, the top of the funnel, customer acquisition, and then really delivering that value over time. So for me, that's one of the biggest changes over the last few years, that marketing has taken absolutely the central role in really translating the product, the experience, across the journey, like at every phase of that process. And then I guess the second big chunk is technology, right? Technology has just enabled us to do so much more. Ina mentioned research. You can make far better decisions based on data. the personalization, it can be just so much more, like you can just personalize at scale. Like personalization was a problem because understanding each persona within your ICP, and then secondly, creating all those experiences and content for each persona at different stages. It was a scale problem, and obviously that has been solved through technology. So I think it's more than ever, it's expected now that you know exactly who your buyers are, and you know exactly what to tell them, and you find them exactly where they are. I think that is changing pretty quickly from previous years.
Yeah, I think so too, Zena. This idea of marketing being the center is because they're responsible for the creation of experiences in many respects. And now that the buyer is in control and they decide when they want to capture those experiences, and most of the time it's through digital, that puts the marketer square in line with how the whole organization needs to communicate with the customer. And so I think that the power being with the buyer versus with the, let's say, the vendor or supplier is flipped. And so yeah, I think puts an enormous amount of pressure, but an enormous amount of opportunity on marketers. And so, maybe, as some of the dynamics have changed, so the expectations for you. So how are you measured in 2024 and previous years? How do you expect that to evolve in 2025 and 2026?
Yeah, so I feel like I've noticed this year more than ever this shift away from the traditional attribution models that marketing teams are typically so obsessed with like this sourced this specific outcome, or this one piece of content sourced this, and teams fighting for credit of whether it was marketing sourced or sales sourced or some other team or CX. And I'm noticing the shift towards this holistic view of just contributing to pipeline and having this cross-functional effort of working together. And attribution models today are very different from everyone I speak to in the industry. Ourselves here in dotCMS, we look at the funnel and we look at our success story as a sum of all the pieces of what marketing is doing from the top funnel perspective, and those awareness pieces, and what sales is doing to then take that demand that we've created and push them down the funnel. And so it's a collaborative effort of measuring that outcome. And I feel like the KPIs are now falling into two buckets, at least from my perspective. It's oversimplifying it, but I think this is how we're looking at it. So the top funnel bucket is essentially the brand growth. And within that, it is not the typical vanity KPIs of impressions or overall site traffic or anything like that. It's seeing the de-anonymized specific, your target companies within a specific stage. What are they interacting with on your website? And whatever that is, let's do more of that. Let's go into that direction. What isn't working, let's not do that. Let's do something else. So it's these top funnel brand KPIs that are so much more granular. With all the tools that we have, all the de-anonymization tools, AI tools, we're able to see that journey so much better than just your typical impressions. And then, of course, the other one is pipeline. And that, to me, marketing is a revenue function. That's what we are. We've always been like that. Sorry if anyone, I don't think that's a hot take. Marketing is a revenue function. And that's why I said CRO is the first person you collaborate with on the plan, and to align those goals and those revenue goals, because ultimately everything we do, content we produce, channels we choose, events we go to, whatever our strategy is that we put in place, it's tied back to revenue. So we're ultimately measured on that contribution to business growth. So cost of acquisition, ROI, pipeline, retention, down to the customer KPIs. So those two buckets, it might be a little oversimplified. We have a rainbow of KPIs. Marketers, you know this. We have dashboards on dashboards. We are looking at a ton of different metrics, but they're getting a lot more granular and very, very pipeline focused. And I see that being the trend going forward. We're just going to do this more and more. We're going to get this granular data, and we're going to keep focusing on pipeline outcomes.
Yeah, a few things on what you said. First, I like how you snuck in an explanation to your answer in rapid fire about the CRO. I noted that for the record. The second thing is this movement away from tactics as things that are being measured and looking at, because that's very much an inside out view as a marketer. Hey, we ran this campaign, we launched this blog, we ran this webinar. And that, while that might be helpful to look at some engagement on those tactics, that doesn't match to the buyer journey. We know that there's so many different buyer journeys. They could start with a blog, listen to a webinar, talk to a sales rep. They could talk to a sales rep first, whatever the ordering might be. And so looking at the tactics doesn't necessarily have a customer view in mind in terms of how they enter the funnel. So I think it's the shift that we've needed as marketers for a long time, the one you talked about, which is at the end of the day, when you walk into the executive office, here's what we report on pipeline, right? Awareness. And all the details under that matter, but that's the place to start knowing how buyers interact. So Zane, maybe I'll kick it to you as you look towards the future. What metrics should marketing leaders be held to? We talked about pipeline, we talked about awareness. Is there anything else that comes to mind?
Yeah, I mean, I think most marketing leaders, I guess, at this point agree on not tracking MQLs. That's definitely out. What I mean by that is the pipeline is important, but it's super important that they're actually qualified. They are from within your target accounts or personas or ICPs. I mean, the right type of customer is important. Again, that will help the whole the sales organization, at least, right? They should have better conversions. They will be spending time on better leads and whatnot. I think one thing we might have missed is the brand. I do feel Nina mentioned it initially, in authentic experiences and in building an authentic brand, especially in this day and age where there is just dilution of everything. With so much content, brand equity, it eventually translates into better metrics across the board, right? Your conversions should improve, your sales cycle should shorten, customers or prospects spend less time researching you because they're already aware that you represent, one, I guess, what does your brand stand for eventually? But other than that, yeah, I mean, there's this pipeline from our target accounts. Then there's revenue goals. Measure. I'm not entirely sure how you measure brand equity at this point, but from making sure that things are trending in the right direction over time, I think that would show you're creating trust with your target audience. And then I guess, as I mentioned, the customer lifetime is important, right? The customer experience over time is important, not just when we acquire that customer. So satisfaction, retention, all of those metrics do come in eventually, which is partially obviously helped by your product and customer experience teams, but also whether or not your key champions or buyers within your customer org are also seeing all the good work that you're doing from an organizational perspective, whether that's building experiences, product, or launching new features and whatnot. Yeah.
Yeah, Zine, the one thing I want to hone in on is brand equity that you talked about. And that ties back to what Inna brought up in the very beginning, which is quantity versus quality. There is a set of guidelines that marketers are going to start to be held to and need to be held to around quality, which translates to equity in your brand. And so I think that's a really important one, because especially with the adoption of AI, awareness might not be a problem, but quality and equity are going to be challenges for marketers and how they balance those two things. So I think and at dotCMS, one of the things that we think about is how do you power all the teams who are going to be part of that content lifecycle to make sure you get that quality, both in the delivery as well as allowing multiple people to contribute to ensure that you have the right content at the different stages of the buyer journey. With that in mind, and knowing that the focus is pipeline, building brand equity, what are the disciplines of marketing that should be the focus, and what are the things that are becoming maybe less important than they were a few years ago, in your opinion?
Yeah, so let's talk what's in, what's out. So what is in is leveraging AI in a way that it is critical to our marketing team's internal workflows, but we have to be superstar editors and proofers and prompters. It's not there to do our job for us. we have to use it as a really, really powerful tool for us. For example, just a few tactical examples also for listeners. I'm using a tool like Clay to be able to leverage AI to build out orchestrations or build out lookalike models for your TAM or for your TAL, using just simple ChatGPT for helping you write certain content or proof certain content, or even create scoring models for your accounts, for your content, for your personas. Have those conversations back and forth and understand. Even ask AI to give you feedback on certain things of who this piece of content would be meant for, how could they potentially react, write hypotheses or those kind of analytics models. It's a very, very powerful tool, but it has to be like an assistant to the marketing team, at least at this current stage. So that is in, but using AI just to generate content and ship it is out. And also out is these traditional ways of we've always been saying, I feel like in marketing, that we have to get the right message in front of the right audience at the right time, in the right format. So all of those things have to be checked off. But I feel like right now, more than ever, marketers are pushing back against all these traditional things that we used to do just for the sake of doing it. Like everyone's been doing it. We've been doing static image ads, and that's just what we've been doing. And right now, we're going completely against all these traditional ways of doing campaigns or any kind of creation of programs or content, and innovating more, especially with the use of AI. For example, for us at dotCMS, we don't use any static ads at all. Our buyer personas are, whether in the creative marketing space, so they're very savvy. They're not going to react well to any just basic, simple ad with a KPI on it. And the other portion is very technical teams and developers, and they're very smart, and they go to these different types of channels. They will not just convert on LinkedIn, which is a typical lane for marketers to include in their channel strategy. So for us right now, the content and channel strategy is all about video interactive content. And that goes back to providing value. With interactive content, here's a preview of the platform, here's a preview of what you can do, without you needing to give us any information. We are just giving you a resource and a tool. We are providing the right message to the right persona on the right channel where they are. So we're meeting the customers where they are. And then finally, I think, also that balance between quality and quantity. Like I said in the beginning, it's very different right now, because I feel like if you just focus on quality and create those quality pieces, you might miss that discoverability where wherever your buyer is, they're doing research on all these different platforms. You still need to have that quantity of social posts, that social media strategy to be that vehicle for distribution of your quality content. So you have to strike that balance where you still have the quality content that you promote and quantity content that's there for discoverability. And one tactical piece from us as well is with our SEO strategy, which is now not just search engine strategy, it's like search engine and AI discoverability strategy. If we publish any post that is for discoverability for somebody doing even early research, we are not going to do any kind of campaign around it, promotion, and we might not even list it on the website. But it exists, and it's optimized enough that it will show up in AI queries or in search results. So that's, I would say, the third bucket that is very much in.
Yeah, it's interesting, because there is desire for additional simplicity in terms of understanding who your TAM and TAL are, right? And making sure you use the tools to get to them efficiently, knowing who they are. But then there's complexity specifically around, managing this concept you talked about between discoverability and quality that ends up going into experience and kind of really understanding the audience to ensure that you're providing what they need and getting a sense of those nuances. See, and I do think that this is an important one. So I'm going to kick it to you too. What are the areas where you think sort of the marketing skill set is continuing to evolve and it's important that it evolves? And what are the areas that you see kind of diminishing in terms of the importance of marketing?
Yeah, I mean, I'm thinking, because I don't know what to add to what Ina obviously elaborated. I think, again, for me, at a very high level, broad is out and targeted is in. And then you can just, color both of those on what do we mean by broad and what do we mean by targeted, whether that's personalization, data-driven decision-making, content strategy, what kind of content, and obviously technology helps there a lot. But to Ina's point, I think, tech as an enabler, but the human touch is ever so important. The authenticity is as more important than ever. So yeah, that's pretty much aligned with Ina on her
No, it's
response.
great. It's great
I can also
color on
add
it.
something, one
Go
more
ahead, please.
point that I just thought of because we want to add value with this podcast. A little bit of a technical tip for any marketers listening. It's that concept of delivering the right message to the right persona in the right way. I think what's also in is thinking outside the box. Like I said, pushing against traditional, but for example, something we're doing next year is geofencing tactics. So it's very non-traditional type of advertising and doing specific research, leveraging AI around conferences around the US where our personas are going to be and doing very, very targeted geofencing campaigns. So very non-broad LinkedIn strategy, but a lot more focused on targeted and personalized because a lot of those conferences are also vertical specific. So it's that aspect there as well. So that hyper personalization and delivering that personalized vertical message and our value prop at a time when our buyer persona is at a conference at a location where they are ready to buy. So it's thinking outside the box in those kind of terms and finding your customers where they are and giving them value there. So just wanted to add that too as a little tip.
Yeah, no, those are the kind of innovative tactics I think that will help drive the specificity, with targeted being in. So it's a great example, Ina. I guess one last question sort of in this line of thought is what are the boulders that you feel as a marketer you're still pushing uphill that are there maybe constant headwinds that you're facing that you can maybe share with our audience?
Yeah, I would say that the biggest challenge for us is that there's no playbook. There, you can download as many assets and resources, and you can learn and take tips and see what others are doing. But at the end of the day, every business is different. Every model is different. What works for our audience might not work for yours. And there has to be a lot of experimentation, trusting your gut, and at the same time, collecting that data, learning about your persona, listening to customers, listening to prospects, asking those questions, and building your own playbook that might be inspired by someone else or somebody else's blueprint. But they're really, at the end of the day, especially in today's world with so many AI tools and plugins and little like pieces of tech that you can use to make your workflow better. There's no playbook that is a one size fits all, and you have to do that work and research and analysis to make your own playbook and see what works. I listened to a great podcast also called Pipeline Visionaries that every marketer in their own episodes has their own strategy and their own different advice, which is great for inspiration. But at the end of the day, you have to put in that work to analyze and see what really resonates with your audience versus your competitors or others in the space. So I think that's probably the biggest boulder that every marketing leader is pushing is learning who your audience is and crafting that specific plan. So
Yeah. It's
yeah.
great. And I think it's one of the most dangerous things is you can take the playbook from someone else, try to apply, or take a playbook from your previous role and try to apply it to your current company. And so I think that beginner's mindset is so critical. I'm just going to add one from my experience here in terms of the boulder. And hopefully this is practical for our listeners. Have everyone locked in on your ICP and your account list. Who you're going after, who is your ideal customer, who are you focused on? Because I've seen so many times marketers get into a place where they're asked to do so many different things, and then they're asked to do it for multiple audiences, and it's double, triple the work. And so how do you get buy-in from the whole organization? This is who we're focused on for the next year. Someone's inevitably going to come in and say, what about this person that we want to target? And honing in and getting that buy-in is something that is a constant battle, I think, for marketers that needs to be, that rock needs to be put in place before you carry on with some of the other tactics. So, maybe we'll get into some of the details here around building a plan for 25. what are your guardrails or guiding principles as you started to put pen to paper and build out the plan for dotCMS?
Yeah, so there's a few. One major tip that I've learned when building a plan is that every item that you have, every tactic or every program or strategic piece, you have to connect that to a line item in your budget or a bucket in your budget. So that way you have a justification for why you're adding something to a plan and why it makes sense, and marking whether that is experimental versus something that has worked already. So that explains why the budget is higher or lower for that specific category. But each item or each tactic or even buckets like events, broad bucket of events or programs or digital advertising, attaching that to specific budget items and goals that you would work through with your CRO, CFO is very, very helpful and is kind of like the foundation for building the plan. Then the second thing I would say is having those data-driven decisions. Very
Mm-hmm.
important. Even if you don't have the full model figured out on your reporting, even if you have some data here and there, use that to justify what you're planning to do in the year. Seeing that the hypothesis is that certain things worked for our persona here, we're going to take that and we're going to blow it up and try this and go into this direction, whether it's direct mail or an event or something different, like an email program or something like that. So that's the second, is having data be at the center of all your decisions. So data budget, then having your customer be at the center of your decisions. That kind of falls back to attaching it to budgets. Everything should be should be connected, really. So having your customer be at the center of your decisions and explaining of why each piece is in your plan. What is it going to do for your customer? What value is it going to provide? This content program, this content syndication program is there because we're going to deliver this message to our audience in this channel. This event that we're planning, this virtual event that we're doing is there to educate. And we have a philosophy here at dotCMS of content. We want to have that be more known and we want to push that forward. So that event is there for that reason. And so having that justification and having the customer's needs and ideas at the center of that, I think is pretty important. And then lastly, I also think staying agile. So I also want to answer the first rapid fire question. My plans are usually pretty solid for half a year. So I do H1, H2 mapped out. When it comes to things like events or when you attach strategy to product releases, you want to do campaigns around that. Those are obviously going to be there for the entire year, but the majority of the plan for the second half of the year, it's very difficult to plan for next December in an industry that's changing, especially if we're learning a lot about our personas. It's important to stay agile and understand that we made a bet on this campaign or this strategy and it hasn't worked and we're going to pivot. We're not just going to keep going because we planned it until the end of next year. And so staying agile and making sure that you take those learnings and accept that failure. Sometimes it's, especially if you're experimenting and learning and building that playbook, you're going to fail and you're going to see like, I trusted my gut and I wanted this really well designed ebook to do really well, but it just didn't resonate. So we're going to try something completely different. So I think it's really, really important to stay agile and just pivot when needed. So those would be my hot tips.
Those are great. I think the mapping the tactics back to the customer needs as the foundation, and then tying that into budget is a great place to start. Because often you get asked, why aren't we doing XYZ marketing tactic? And you say, well, why are you doing XYZ marketing tactic? Because we're trying to do this, generate awareness with our customers. And so being able to say, hey, what you want is awareness. It's not as much about the tactics. And then you can weigh the customer needs first before you even start thinking about marketing. Right. So I thought that was great. And I think the agile piece was great too, because there's this, how the market is evolving so quickly with technology and customer engagement strategies. There has to be that. I think probably something on our listeners' mind is, how should you be thinking about AI as part of your plan? Maybe just some guardrails. And I'd like for you both to answer this question. Like, what's your thought process on how to use AI as part of your plan? Ina, why don't we go with you? You were on a roll, and then we'll go to Zane.
I was going to say I can start. So to me, AI is critical for internal teams. Especially if you're a smaller team and you want to scale and you want to build certain experiences, it's very critical. So it's part of our workflows at this point. But like I mentioned, it's part of our workflows in a way that helps us and allows us to scale certain things that we normally wouldn't be able to do without it. And we also do our due diligence and research on different AI tools that are popping up that we want to maybe try for generation of graphics, video editing, transcripts, smaller things like that, like nuanced little details. So AI for us internally is critical. AI for customer engagement should be done right. So we do have it implemented in some of our strategies. Like, for example, on the marketing side, we have it in our conversational marketing, like with the chatbot and de-anonymization of traffic on our website. But it has to be authentic. And we have tested a bunch of different prompts to get that right greeting and the right messages and the right communications. Or for email strategies, like I mentioned, Clay, we're using that. And we're using AI to help us build our communication plan as well, like outbound communication, which we're also, as we're growing and we're trying to scale, it's critical in building out those outbound comms, but also important to strike that balance of sounding authentic and driving that value instead of sounding robotic. And so it's a huge part of our workflows now. But I'm also not in the camp of like AI can do all of our jobs. A lot of what AI is doing today is not great, and it needs to be trained and prompted. And I've had so many conversations, and even conversations like back and forth with AI, trying to get it to answer your questions or ask you questions that you can then answer, and then train it to a certain way that you can then use it to help you model your, account list or analyze your data and provide outcome or even write some code. We had a great session for our .connect where Freddie walked through how we use AI for coding and creating landing pages. So it's about training those AI models too to give you what you want. So it's critical, but it has to be done right to be successful.
That's great, Ina. The depth of your answers on all kind of areas, both customer facing and internal. The thing that jumped out at me was AI is embedded in our workflows. I'm paraphrasing, but I think that's sort of the vantage point in many ways. And there's healthy skepticism on how it impacts consumer engagement. Zane, I'm actually going to keep going. I'm excited to hear your answer on how do you think about and talk to our team about what's locked in for marketing and versus what's experimental. Any guidelines that you can give for our listeners in terms of best practices or how they should think about that?
Customer preferences are changing all the time, right? That's just not something that stays, especially if you are in an innovative industry. But what is permanent is how you gather that feedback. What is that feedback loop back into the product, back into marketing, back into customer experience? So I guess most of the foundational things you can say are permanent, whether how do you generate insights from your customers and how do you build content, where do you publish, what channels, what is the content type and whatnot. But yes, I mean, what keeps changing is the product and customer preferences. And that should always be changing. But the foundation through which you gather those insights, I think should be fairly stable, so to speak.
Yeah, I love that thing because it's kind of flips the question on the head a little bit. It's not even about marketing tactics and how you think about, hey, this is fixed budget, this is experimental. It's more of how is the customer evolving, and then how do you evolve with the customer? No, I think it's a good balance too, because I think one of the dangers within marketing is to always pivot. Something new comes.
Right.
See a competitor doing something, you want to tweak your message. And so an inside out view is always that you're thinking about your organization and how you feel about the versus what a consumer might think. So I think
yeah, sorry, something did pop up into my head, and will back me up here. So we obviously have a portion of our budget which is only for let's call them programs or campaigns, right? So you have the technology spend, you obviously have some, outsourced services that you use, whether that's an SEO agency or a design agency or whatnot. Those costs, broadly speaking, will stay more or less consistent. If you have an event strategy, that cost will more or less fall within, your planned, spend. But then there is this portion of the budget which you have for campaigns/programs, whether you want to spend all of that on Google, which we have done in the past, or if you want to, have a little more of a nuanced approach in terms of which channels, and that depends on, where your customers are showing up. And to your point, based on experimentation on what is working and what is not working, you can dial it up and dial it down, based on performance.
Yeah, I can actually add to that. So I would also say 70-30 for us at the moment, just because we have we do have those consistent spending categories like certain freelancers or some programs that we know have worked or events. But we also have 30 where we're just like, let's try this direct mail program and see how it works. And so we have that hypothesis and expectation that it might fail. So that's how we're looking at it. But also, Ryan, what you're saying, preferences change, technology changes, everything might change super quickly. Like, for example, something that is super tried and true for marketers and one of the biggest spending categories for a lot of teams is Google search ads. Right. And then the second is traditional SEO optimization. So content creation optimized for Google results in specific ways, the ways that Google would crawl and render and everything. Google recently announced that they're shifting in this agentic era, they're shifting towards complete AI model and AI research model. So we don't know what that future looks like. It's going to be completely different. Search ads might be entirely different. We might spend more or less. We might start bidding on AI queries or AI questions, or there might be that type of an auction now versus like the traditional search results for like phrase match or exact match and things like that. So we don't know what that future looks like. We know it's coming, but you have to still be like, back again to my point of you have to still be agile where you have to be ready to pivot, because with those kind of technology changes, an algorithm changes, your consumer behavior is going to change. They're going to consume content differently. They're going to find answers differently. And that might trigger completely different channels to work for you. Like in person might suddenly work for you because your persona might not want to interact with this Google AI model as much in a specific time frame. So you have to be adaptable because so much is changing. So it's very difficult to say like the exact percentage of what is going to work and what's experimental, because things might change very quickly. That's also my take.
That's great. I think I loved your example of bidding on queries versus, searches. Like, I think that there's a lot that's packed into that. Essentially, what is the first tool that's used for discovering a new product or service is sort of at the heart of that. We're going to try and do two more questions. The first one, I want everyone to take a big dose of humility. Actually, I think it's just going to be Inna for this one, because it's about your failures and where you messed up so other people don't have to mess up like you did. And I will weigh in on this question too. What mistakes have you made in the past when building out an annual plan that you've learned from that you might want to share with our listeners?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I've been planning myself, leading the plan for years. I've been part of plans for years. So I've seen plenty of mistakes. One of the biggest ones I think a lot of teams are guilty of is prioritization and focus. A lot of the times we want to do so many things and so many other companies are doing it. And so we want to do it too. We see the cool new thing, and we take it on. So I think setting that prioritization level to the plan and the different tactics and the different strategic focuses, and again, having that explanation as to why something is on the plan, I think is really important, because a lot of teams are guilty of overestimating how much we can take on and launch. Another thing I would say in planning is Also, probably not attaching things that we were planning to budget categories. I've seen that a lot as well, which is why now it's one of my hot tips. I've seen the plan just be very much tactical and not focused on what at the end of the day, what the budget buckets would be aligned to these programs. Like, for example, like advertising channels. We're going to do LinkedIn, Facebook, this. And then at the end of the day, it's going to be such a different breakdown financially of how much you spend in each category and at what point you can say that you're going to pivot. And so that is another thing. And the last thing is attaching goals. So some sort of benchmarks to all of the programs that you have on your plan. Even if it's a completely brand new tactic, set a benchmark that you think is your base case scenario, something that you think this is what I'm going to say made it like okay for us. The best case scenario, which is like the best success outcome, and then the worst case, which is where you're going to call this a failure and pivot. So attaching goals to all of your items on your plan, I think is pretty important for them, for then also for you to justify to your CEO or to whoever else why you chose to do this, what your plan was, why you thought it failed, and when it did fail, you decided to go in a different direction. So budgets, goals, and prioritization.
I like it, Inna. Nice dose of humility you took before you gave that answer. I'm just going to give one because apparently I have a little more pride. I didn't take as deep of a dose of humility, but hopefully it's focused, which is partial investments. And what I mean by that is, you need to raise awareness for your organization, but you don't, and you say we're going to do content, but you only allocate enough resources and budget to create content for a third of the buyer journey, which they need all of it. And so you showed up in sort of a non-complete way, and it leaves the buyer in a place where they're like, well, I read about what makes you different from so-and-so, but now I don't understand how the technical features work because you don't have a robust library of technical content that's needed for the buyer journey. So that's one partial investment. The other is, and this is a simple one, which is events. Showing up to an event without a real presence, without a real something unique to share when someone comes by your booth is worse for the brand than showing up with the small table and being there. And so being mindful of making a full investment in the things that tie back to the goals I think is really important. Instead of saying, hey, we need to do content strategy. Hey, we need to do events. Hey, we need to, double our output when it comes to webinars. Like there has to be a little bit more thought process that goes into that. So
as someone who has managed events and Velcroed a backdrop behind a little rinky table at an event at a conference and chased people around with a lead scanner, I 100% agree. Do less events and do them right. Create a cool swag program around your event strategy. Do 2 events, but show up and do a really cool demo and convince and bring that value in person at the conference. Be memorable and noticeable at an event and provide that brand exposure in the right way. 100% agreed. That just triggered some PTSD for me.
We've all been there, I'm sure, especially if you've worked in growing organizations. They're like, oh, we did a partial investment on this one. Let's do it right next time. Inna, Zane, really appreciate your time. We're going to do one last question. Zane, I'm going to pass it to you first, and then I'll go to Inna. Maybe what are 1 or 2 takeaways that you want our listeners to remember when they think about building their FY25 budget?
Yeah, I'll probably go back to my first point, which is marketing is central to the org. Have a collaboration deep in mind. Collaborate with your success teams, experience teams. Understand exactly, the customer journey through each step, not just, top of the funnel or once they've been acquired. You have to understand the whole journey and then be able to build experiences that showcase that journey. And that requires deep collaboration. So that's, I guess, one. And the second I would say is the hot one, which is AI is not a replacement. It's an enabler. It should absolutely power most of your, workflows, whether that's creation of content or personalization or data-driven decision making.
Zane, I have to say, I wish we would have got to this point a little earlier, and I blame myself as the host, because the more you collaborate with the different stakeholders, the bigger your budget is going to get, because they're going to realize marketing is the person who's writing, helping with all the content around product, right? Or at least shepherding it. They're the one who's writing competitive content or whatever else it may be. And so the more collaboration there is up front, the less fight there is going to be for budget, because everyone is going to be saying, hey, they are at the center. We need to give them what they need in order to support the different functions, product release, whatever it may be. So that is a huge takeaway. If you want to increase your budget, go to the stakeholders and groups and remind them that you are supporting them in many different ways.
And maybe one step, maybe a step back here, Ryan, is before you even showcase how you deliver value, the first step is, I guess, to really understand the buyer journey or the customer journey. So that understanding will then enable you to deliver that value, whether that's current customers or new, or building brand and whatnot. But you're absolutely on point. The more collaboration there is, the more central marketing's role becomes, and budget comes out of it. So it's a worthy fight.
And the more internal buy-in you have as well, where if marketing if the marketing strategy also supports the product team and the CS team in certain ways, marketing and sales are obviously very much attached at the hip. But if the marketing function is there to also provide internal value, and every team is aligned and understands why marketing is doing certain things, that just creates happy, healthy teamwork environment.
Absolutely, Inna. Absolutely. Anything else you wanted, any other takeaways you wanted to give to our listeners, Inna, before we depart?
Yeah, for sure. Embrace new technology and learn something new all the time consistently. You see a new tool popping up somewhere, learn about it. See if it does fit into your strategy. See if that is something that you can add to your plan and where you can pivot into. So don't be afraid to learn. There's so much new coming out, all new stuff coming out all the time. So I think it's important to stay up to date on everything. Don't be afraid to fail, as long as you do have those goals set and that story of the best case, base case scenario, and just deliver authenticity, deliver value in whichever way it makes sense for your unique playbook.
Awesome. Thank you, Inna. Thank you, Zane. Thank you to our listeners for joining Real Talk, Real Trust with dotCMS, and we'll see you on the next episode. So long.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks, everyone.